Bring on the Mountaineers. 100 years of West Virginia football is brought to you by Foodland. We know what you like. By Folgers, the mountain-grown coffee. By Nestea, the natural refresher. By County Line Cheese, 100% natural cheese. And by Pepsi. You got the right one, baby. Uh-huh.
Now let's bring on the Mountaineers!
Bring on the Mountaineers, the official battle cry of West Virginia football. For 100 years, the Mountaineers have charged onto the fields of battle and into the hearts of the West Virginia people.
Harry Deeman racing downfield on the far side. That ball is cut.
He finds the opening up the middle. He's to the 20 to 25. He's racing. Swings out to the right, cuts down on the 20 to 15, to 10 to 5.
If you're supposed to be an arrow when that ball snaps, you get there. Football team is ever ready to play a game. It's you.
And let's understand the fourth quarter will decide this football game.
Touchdown, West Virginia! Touchdown, West Virginia!
Touchdown, West Virginia!
A touchdown, West Virginia!
Men of might and moments of majesty. It has been a century-long call to glory. Bring on the Mountaineers. 100 years of West Virginia football. Almost heaven, the rugged beauty that is West Virginia. Massive mountains and peaceful valleys surround the small towns and villages of this proud state. This is home to a people who have held on to the values of their forefathers. Generations known for their fierce loyalties and hard-working lifestyles. Attitudes which are reflected in the spirit of the West Virginia University Mountaineers.
The university's football team is really the state's football team. I think that's one of the lessons you learn when you're associated with the university, is that people, a lot of people in every corner of the state have that flying WV on their truck or their car. That's their link in many ways to the university.
They love the Mountaineers. It's a relationship that starts when they're very young, I think, because they grow up worshiping the Mountaineers and the Mountaineer players. And they keep that loyalty over the years. And that does say something very positive about the people in this state.
I think when the state was going through some very difficult times, the football would kind of bring a little bit of spirit and pride to the people of West Virginia. And it made us proud that when we'd go back to our little hometowns, I was from a little town called Wellsburg, West Virginia, and the sense of pride that people would take there. I mean, the paper mills had closed down. The steel mills weren't working that well in those days. And when I went back, it seemed like it was a very joyous occasion. People had taken a sense of pride. I mean, from the Elks Club to the American Legion to the little clubs that kids very, very seldom hear about today. I mean, you were like a local hero.
Small town heroes who grew up dreaming of one day wearing the gold and blue, playing for their home state, being called a Mountaineer.
I came from Moundsville, West Virginia. Couldn't wait to put on a gold and blue football uniform here at West Virginia University. You know, West Virginia people really stick together, and they have a uniqueness about themselves. And when they get a cause in front of them and put their shoulders together, they're going to accomplish that. And they take a lot of pride in what they do. And one of the things they take a lot of pride in is that football team they put out on that field.
The people in this state are a little different. They've worked hard to make a living. Some of them have been bounced around a little bit with the tough situation of steel and coal, but they've always come out clawing and scratching. And I like to think that our football team has come out clawing and scratching. And our football team identifies with the people in this state. We know the people love us, and we love them. It's a special feeling.
It has been a century-long love affair between the Mountain State and its home team. For 100 years, the pride of the people of West Virginia has come alive in Mountaineer football. The story begins 100 years ago in 1891. As legend has it, proceeds from this university production of Shakespeare's Richard III helped finance the school's first football team. After converting a cow pasture into a makeshift gridiron, the Mountaineers lost their first contest to Washington and Jefferson by the score of 72-0. It was a rocky start on the Mountaineers' road to glory. 1915 marked the arrival of West Virginia's first consensus football All-American, Ira "Errett" Rogers. Rogers was a magnificent all-round athlete. In his senior year, he was captain of the baseball, basketball, and football team. Teammate Paul Hager remembers the brilliant Rogers.
He was the greatest athlete ever in West Virginia. He could pass, he could kick. In the Princeton game, where Rogers told the end, go down there in the center of the goal line and I'll throw the pass to him. And Rogers threw him a pass for about 50 yards, and he caught it for a touchdown.
Rogers' performance against that powerful Princeton team in 1919 helped spark the Mountaineers to a stunning 25-0 victory and secured his name on Walter Camp's All-American team. To this day, Rogers still holds 9 Mountaineer scoring records. He would go on to coach at West Virginia for 9 seasons. But the brilliant Errett Rogers will always be remembered as one of the greatest athletes to ever play the game. New head coach Clarence Spears arrived in Morgantown in 1921 and systematically put together a program which is referred to today as the first golden era of West Virginia football. Under Spears, the mighty squad of 1922 went undefeated, winning 10 games and tying 1, including a 21-13 victory over Gonzaga in the Mountaineers' first ever postseason bowl game, the East-West Bowl in San Diego. The winning ways continued under Spears, sparking the construction of a new stadium along Beechhurst Avenue down by the Mon River. Mountaineer Field officially opened in 1924, becoming the home of a program which was steadily growing in national scope and prominence. With the tougher schedules, though, came some tougher times for Mountaineer teams. Then in 1937, former Mountaineer team captain Marshall Little Sleepy Glenn took over as coach and led West Virginia to an 8-1-1 record and a dazzling 7-6 upset of Texas Tech in the 1938 Sun Bowl. West Virginia would return to the Sun Bowl to face another Texas opponent following the 1948 season. Under head coach Dud DeGroot, the Mountaineers went 9-3 and earned their second trip to El Paso. Number 12 quarterback Jimmy Walthall led the way in a come-from-behind victory against Texas Western. However, a disappointing 4-6-1 record in 1949 led to the resignation of DeGroot as head coach. The following spring, the ball was passed to Art Lewis, and there were few in the Mountain State who could predict what lay ahead for the Mountaineers. Art "Pappy" Lewis moved back to West Virginia in 1950 to take over the coaching job he said he had always wanted. A shrewd judge of talent, Lewis used both his grand style as well as his fondness for down-home cooking to recruit the quality players that would carry West Virginia all the way to the Sugar Bowl.
He was a grand person. He was the kind of a person that walked into the house and your mother and dad, especially the mother, he went straight to the kitchen, sat down at the kitchen table, and He looked in the pot and to see what was there to eat, and I often said that it didn't make any difference where you might want to go to school. If you had a choice, why, it was over, because he was such a friend of the parents.
He was the next thing to a father to most of us, and he was a great recruiter. The one thing you didn't want to do was you didn't want to get in trouble with Pappy, because when he called you in his office, you knew you were in trouble, and he either straightened you out or the troublemakers sort of left the university.
He was a big old guy, looked like a lot like John L. Lewis, big old bushy eyebrows, and I guess Pap was about 250 pounds, which was big for a coach at that time, and he was one of the biggest guys I'd ever seen, and he had a big old roar about him, and he just, you knew that he was the boss, and he ran his football team, and you were his boys, and that team was his family.
It just so happened that Pappy Lewis's family contained some of the finest football talent of the 50s. Quarterback Fred Wyant led the charge in some of the strongest backfields in West Virginia history. They operated behind a virtual brick wall of protection, featuring stars Bob Orders, Gene Lamone, Chuck Halley, Bruce Bosley, and Sam Huff. Huff, number 75, played the game with a pure intensity and a simple philosophy. Whether on offense or defense, the object was the same. Just beat the man in front of you.
He was an individual that would never say, oh, I can't do this or I can't do that. He could do everything. Rosie Greer in those days was probably the biggest defensive lineman. And Sam Huff handled him like he was a little puppy dog.
Sam, you can depend on him. You can say that he's going to be there all the way through. You know, he's going to do his job. He was an outstanding gentleman, and when he got out there on the football field, he was all football player.
One of the greatest to ever play the game, Huff was named All-American in 1955, but he wasn't alone. Line mate Bruce Bosley, number 77, also earned All-America honors.
Keep your eye on the right tackle. He's Bruce Bosley, All-America tackle from West Virginia. Coach Art Lewis thinks Bosley is the best pass defense ever invented. Big, fast, and rough, all that a tackle ought to be.
Bruce Bosley could simply do it all. He was a punishing blocker on offense, as well as one of the nation's best pass rushers. In 1955, Bruce Bosley became the Mountaineers' first consensus All-American since Aaron Rodgers in 1919. Behind the power of Bosley, Huff, and company, the Mountaineers made a gallant run for glory. Running backs Jack Stone, Tommy Allman, Bob Moss, and Joe Marconi all tore up big chunks of yardage for WVU. In 1951, the Mountaineers scored a record 89 points in a single game against Geneva College. And the 1952 season featured a stunning 16-0 shutout over Pitt. But there are two accomplishments which stand above all others in this era of excellence. From 1953 through 1955, the Mountaineers put together a remarkable run of 3 consecutive victories over Penn State, a feat no other West Virginia team has ever accomplished. In Game 1, Fred Wyant and Bob Marker hooked up for a dazzling 64-yard touchdown pass that put West Virginia on top. But it was Bruce Bosley blocking a fourth-quarter punt and then recovering the ball in the end zone that put this game out of reach.
The next year, the score was 19-14, I believe. That was the only time I never thought we could win a game. There were no two-point conversions, and they had 14-6, which means we had to score 2 touchdowns. That day, there were 9 of us that went 60 minutes playing both ways. And I said, I really don't, to myself, not to anybody else, I didn't think we could win. And we got the ball in the last quarter and scored 2 touchdowns. And scored on a quarterback sneak. That made it 14-13, and then we came back and on an option play from 42 yards out, and Dick Nicholson ran 42 yards for a score. Lenny Moore tackled him on about the 1 yard line, and he drug him in, and it was probably one of the most exciting finishes. If you ever, Jack Fleming was up on the, he was up on the stand, his desk up there, screaming at the top of his voice.
In 1955, it was all the Mountaineers as they crushed Penn State with one of the nation's best ground attacks, winning the contest 21-7 and ensuring their place as one of the greatest West Virginia teams of all time. Rivaling that 55 team was the class of 1953, who, following an 8-1 regular season record, were invited to play in West Virginia's first major bowl game, the 1954 Sugar Bowl versus Georgia Tech. It was a team that moved West Virginia University into college football's elite, but the triumph of that season turned into frustration on game day.
New Orleans and Sugar Bowl highlights. Georgia Tech versus West Virginia before 75,000 spectators. 20 yards through the air and on the ground for the rambling wrecks of Georgia Tech, sparked by Pepper Rogers. Tech
it was the big game, one of the big games, and nationally televised in those days and what have you. And you know, we were so elated, it was unreal, and you know, it was the first time they ever had gone to a major bowl. And then to lose the way we did, but it was a very, very disappointing and just a tough situation to cope with.
It was written that Pappy Lewis had tears in his eyes following the 42-19 defeat. The Sugar Bowl bid was the crowning achievement of his glorious 10-year reign as head coach. This second golden era of Mountaineer football ended when Lewis resigned in 1959. But the legacy of his Mountaineer teams of the 50s reaches far beyond Morgantown, stretching all the way to the NFL. West Virginia Pitt, a feud so fierce it is simply called the Backyard Brawl.
It's never going to change. You know, it's like the Hatfields and McCoys, and we don't like them and they don't like us.
Pure hatred, boy, that can add some sparks to the football game, man.
West Virginia lined up to go. There's a fake. Hostetler keeps the ball, rolls around the right side into the end zone to score. Hostetler with a great fake. He curves it around the right side. He takes it in the favor.
The whole state lived and died on who was going to win that game. And there are people that, I mean, people that literally can't say anything nice about Pittsburgh, period.
I remember a Pitt coach one time said you could take a Chicago Bears and put Pitt uniforms on them, and West Virginia would play them a good game.
Beginning with an 8-0 West Virginia shutout in 1895, this rivalry has at times reached the intensity of an all-out war. Old-timers still remember a pair of legendary 9-6 wins in the 1920s. And former head coach Gene Corum will never forget the sensational 63-48 victory in 1965, one of the greatest collegiate games of all time.
We came into the game, and of course, we thought it would be a cliffhanger, and reasonably low-scoring game. We had no reason to think it was going to be a high-scoring game. But the first 3 times we got the ball, we scored. But then Pitt kept working back. And it seemed like both teams we would hold for 2 downs. Then something would break loose.
Running back Garrett Ford, number 32, rushed for over 200 yards and 3 scores that day, while quarterback Alan McCune threw 5 touchdown passes in one of the wildest Saturday afternoons ever in Old Mountaineer Field.
Our scout, who was scouting the next team, I don't recall exactly where he was, but he was in a press box scouting our next opponent. And of course, he was interested in getting our Pitt score. And he kept coming in 28-27 in the second quarter, 35-34, beginning at the half, or some such chorus. And he said they kept sending back, please send corrected score.
The unbelievable final score of 63-48 went down as the highest-scoring Division I game in history. But more importantly for the Mountaineers, it marked another sweet victory over arch-rival Pitt. Head coach Jim Carlin enjoyed 4 successful seasons at West Virginia, including a sparkling 10-2 record in 1969. The year was capped off with a record-setting win over South Carolina in the Peach Bowl. But as far as West Virginia fans were concerned, the biggest game that year took place in Morgantown, where the Mountaineers crushed Pitt for the 3rd year in a row. The powerful backfield of Eddie Williams, Bob Gresham, and Jim Braxton took control of the game, and the Mountaineers cruised to victory 49-18. Pitt Panthers left West Virginia that day battered and bruised, for the 31-point loss was their worst ever at the hands of the Mountaineers. '70 would hold some measure of revenge for Pitt, as new Mountaineer coach Bobby Bowden suffered through the worst defeat in his career.
The most embarrassing game I have ever been situated in my life was my first game against Pitt in 1970. And I embarrassed the whole state of West Virginia. I embarrassed myself. I embarrassed my team. We played them up there in 1970. We led them 35-8 at the half. I mean, it was a rout. And we go out there the second half and get beat. That's the worst thing that has ever happened to me in football.
If the 36-35 loss remains as one of Bowden's darkest moments, then his brightest day arrived in 1975, when his squad finished 9-3, won a Peach Bowl championship, and pulled out one of the biggest wins in the history of Mountaineer football.
Jack Fleming along with Woody O'Hara. West Virginia University football, 1975. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A jam-packed house for the West Virginia Pitt game on the campus of West Virginia University.
I remember before that game, before the Pitt game, before we went out, the governor came in. And it was so quiet in there, it was scary. I think the coaches were nervous. Nobody was saying anything. It was, you could drop a pin and you could hear it. We were ranked, I believe at that time, 9th, and Pitt was ranked 8th. And we didn't really like each other much, and it was a slugfest the first half. It ended up at halftime 0-0.
Destined to be a fight to the finish, West Virginia was able to pull ahead twice in the second half. But each time, Tony Dorsett and the Panthers battled back to tie. After more than 59 minutes of rugged hand-to-hand combat, the score in this backyard brawl remained tied 14-14.
With less than a minute to go, Pitt was on about their 10-yard line and had to punt to us. So we fielded it about the 50. The last play we ran before we kicked, Danny Kendra was the quarterback. He dropped back and hit Swenson on a swing pattern, and he caught it and got knocked out of bounds, and that stopped the clock. If he had got knocked out of bounds, I don't know if we could have stopped the clock.
With just 4 seconds remaining, it all came down to sophomore kicker Bill McKenzie.
4 seconds to go. Holy mackerel, can you believe this? Bill McKenzie is on. It will be a 38-yard attempt. Snap. McKenzie kicks it. It is long enough. McKenzie kicks it. It is good. The ball game is over. McKenzie kicks a 38-yard field goal in the final play of the football game. There's a mob scene out on the field.
Now, it was the most exciting ending I've ever seen. When he kicked that goal, the kids turned around and mobbed him. Then our team went out there and mobbed him. He was on the ground and everybody just laying on top. Then the fans came out of stands and it was just one big pile up. That's one of the most exciting wins I've ever been involved with in my life.
The Mountaineer fans, what a mob scene. You haven't seen anything like it.
Now let's bring on the Mountaineers.
Old Mountaineer Field was part of that university. There was something special about it. And we were very difficult to beat there. I mean, you know, when he shot off that gun and you came out on that field, I mean, you were ready to play. And like I always said, you might beat us, but you're not going to get out of town.
Old Mountaineer Field stood for 55 years in downtown Morgantown as the official home of West Virginia football. Rising above the Monongahela River, a tradition was built upon this gridiron, a tradition of Mountaineer pride and pageantry.
The people were right down on top of you. Everybody was right down on the sounds, and when that band came out of that, closed into that stadium through that horseshoe, and people just packed to get in there. I mean, they live and die for tickets to come up there, and there was no place to park, and there was a tremendous amount of camaraderie that came about because of people parking their cars and walking and eating downtown, and they were all together, and then they all sort of funneled into that stadium and then funneled out to go home, you know, at the end of the day.
Mountaineer Field was so cramped that when we would play Pitt or someone like that, there'd be like 37,000 people in a 34,000-seat stadium. And on the sideline, it was so packed that the visiting team would have to ask people to move out the way so they can get on and off the field and so forth. And the people right on top of it.
The old stadium, number one, everybody sat on the field. Not really, I mean, literally, there wasn't a bad seat in the house. And so as a coach, you're standing right there, those people, you could hear everything they called you. Now in the end zone, when you catch a pass, there's a guy standing right there ready to catch you, you know. And so everybody was sitting right on top of you. And it was just a great place to play because everybody there was for you.
During the 60s and 70s, Mountaineer fans were treated to a non-stop parade of all-star talent. Names like Dick Lethbridge, Eddie Williams, Bob Gresham, and Mike Sherwood in the 60s were followed by Pete Wood, Artie Owens, Dan Kendra, and Kerry Marbury in the 70s. Three names, however, rise above all others as superstars of these West Virginia glory days. Halfback Garrett Ford, number 32, arrived in Morgantown from Washington, D.C., and proceeded to rewrite the Mountaineer record books. Ford had the strength and size to power through the line, and then, once on the other side, his long, graceful stride left defensemen struggling to catch up.
I was never very fast, and I was a good player on a fair team. It amazes me because now you hear people saying, boy, you were, a great player, this and that. I was never a great player. I really wasn't. I never had great speed, but I liked playing football, and I ran hard and I did the best I could with it. My big thing was I just liked to run over top of me, and I didn't worry about going outside or going around. It was one-on-one, and especially if you were a defensive back, it was all over for you.
Following Ford was All-America fullback Jim Braxton, number 44. If Ford could be compared to a sleek and slippery cat, then Braxton was a charging locomotive. And once he built up a head of steam, he was nearly impossible to stop. In both 1969 and 70, he led West Virginia in scoring, though not just by virtue of his 22 touchdowns. The burly fullback was also the team's place kicker, and after every touchdown, he would hurry to change shoes in order to kick the extra point. He became known as the prototype of the NFL's modern-day power fullback and will remain forever as one of the greatest runners in Mountaineer history. During the mid-70s, Bobby Bowden's wide-open offense was fueled by an All-American flanker named Danny Buggs. Buggs' sure hands and lightning speed provided the game-breaking threat the Mountaineers needed through the air, as well as coming off his trademark flanker reverse. Buggs' most memorable moment came in 1972, when, with West Virginia trailing Maryland with just 6 seconds left in the game, Danny Buggs took the ball at his own 31 and almost single-handedly carried the Mountaineers to victory. The late 70s was a somber period for Mountaineer football. Frank Signetti followed Bobby Bowden as head coach and suffered through 4 straight losing seasons. Following the 1979 season, a decision was made to rebuild the program. It was a decision that would change the course of Mountaineer football forever.
You're laying out going in this direction, you got to be laid out going in that direction. You see what I mean? You can't let your...
On December 10th, 1979, Don Nehlen was introduced as the team's new head coach, and he immediately brought a new attitude and discipline to the struggling Mountaineer football program.
I remember very distinctly the first time that he addressed us as a group. We were over in the Towers dormitory, and we met downstairs, and he came in and introduced himself, and there was 75, 80 guys in there, most of us with baseball caps on, had our feet up on the desks next to us, and he came down and kicked all of our feet off the desks and said, "Boys, this is a football team. We're not screwing around anymore." And from day one, from the first second that he was in front of us as the new head coach, he let us know that he meant business and that we were going to mean business as well.
When I first met the team, I told my wife, "Don't unpack, we have no chance." But when I went through the state of West Virginia, I fell in love with the people because, number one, they were so genuine. I didn't feel I met any phonies, so to speak. I thought they were on my side, win, lose, or draw. It gave me a great feeling. And they were unique people. They did not have a lot of money, but whatever little they had, they were willing to put into our program. Coach, we want to be proud of our football team. We want to be proud of our school in Morgantown. And the thing that struck me is they never referred to West Virginia University. They just referred to the university. It was everybody's school, and that made me feel good.
Mountaineer football, the pride and joy of the West Virginia people, moved to a new home in 1980. Don Nehlen's debut as head coach also marked the unveiling of the school's brand new stadium. It was opening day at New Mountaineer Field, and more than 50,000 fans were there to celebrate the dawn of a new era. Nehlen's team defeated Cincinnati 40-27 in their very first game. And though they finished the year with a 6-6 record, this team was quickly gaining the undeniable spirit of a winner. There was a sense that a seed had been planted. It was the seed of confidence.
Coach Nehlen is very, very positive. And you know, the first thing he did when he came in here is he made people feel good about themselves. And I think that's the number one thing that I noticed when he came here is through our weight program and through the things that he changed, that he had the coaches believing in themselves, he had the players believing in themselves, and that's why he's successful.
Black 11, let's go.
We didn't care. We would challenge anybody, you know. You'd be like walking down the street challenging a dog that's gonna bite you. Say, hey, you gonna bite me? You bite me, I'm gonna bite you back. And that's basically the type of attitude our team took towards everything.
Neyland's Mountaineers were hungry for success. There was a fiery feeling of anticipation as the 1981 season began. The team was led by senior quarterback Oliver Luck. During his 4 years at West Virginia, Luck shattered nearly every passing record in the school's history. He guided the Mountaineers' high-scoring, big-play offense on an 8-3 march through the regular season schedule. Good enough for a bid to meet the powerful Florida Gators in the 1981 Peach Bowl, the school's first bowl invitation in 6 years.
We went into the game against Florida as big underdogs. It was, in fact, the lock of the year by a lot of these betting organizations. We were 14-point underdogs, and we took it to them, beat them 26-6. And to see the 15,000 Mountaineer fans down there and everybody back home watching on television, that was quite an experience.
For Florida, it was quite a surprise. The Gators finished the game with a total of minus 30 yards rushing, watching helplessly as the Mountaineers completed one long drive after another. Many called it the most impressive victory in West Virginia history.
We completely dominated the game from whistle to whistle. And that was just a big shock, really, to the football world because they hadn't heard of West Virginia at that point. And we were still a group of hillbillies from West Virginia who didn't have a chance against a strong Florida Gator team. I think that game propelled us up into the national limelight because it let the fans know that we had a good club. It let the players know that they were able to compete with these so-called football powerhouses like Florida. And it just gave us the national recognition that we needed to get up into the upper echelons of college football teams.
The overwhelming victory over Florida turned out to be just the beginning of the Mountaineers' road to respectability. The next stop was Norman, Oklahoma, where West Virginia would open its 1982 season. The last time WVU had visited Oklahoma, they were humiliated by the score of 52-10.
Some of the players on my team remembered that game because they were youngsters, and they remember the second half. The starters on the Oklahoma team never even had their shoulder pads on. But our team, coming off the Florida victory, we worked all summer as coaches planning for the Oklahoma game, and we did not have one doubter amongst us. Every player on our team felt that we could win. And I remember telling our squad, gentlemen, they have great speed, and chances are we're going to get behind in this game. But as long as we go in at halftime down no more than 10 points, we're going to win.
At first, Neyland's confidence seemed unrealistic. The temperature that day topped 100 degrees. It was also Jeff Hostetler's very first start as the Mountaineers' new quarterback. And as Coach Neyland feared, Oklahoma jumped out to a big lead early in the game.
Things didn't start out the best way. We were down 14-0 after, I think, first two series, and we got things together. And once we saw that you know, we could move the ball on them out there in those adverse conditions, it really boosted our confidence. But even more than the excitement, I think we all realized, hey, we've got a good team here and we can do it.
In the second quarter, things began to click for the Mountaineers. The defense stiffened, and the offense scored 13 straight points to pull within just one. Then, with just 31 seconds remaining in the first half, Neyland and company shocked the Sooners by recovering an onside kick.
33 with 10 seconds to go.
The stunned Oklahoma team was left reeling with disbelief at what happened next.
He does, and there it goes to Darrell Miller. It's a touchdown for West Virginia.
Incredibly, West Virginia had come back to lead 20-14 at the half. And for this courageous group of Mountaineers, it was only the beginning.
Hostetler's back to pass. He fires down the middle. Curlin back at the 15, breaks the tackle to the 10, the 5, and dives in for a touchdown. Hostetler goes to the end zone. Touchdown. Hostetler runs the draw to back over the 40, the 35, the 30. Go Curlin! He's on his way over the 10, the 5, and in there for a touchdown. He scored.
The fantastic 41-27 triumph launched the Mountaineers right into college football's upper class. To Mountaineer followers everywhere, the game will always be remembered as the shot heard round the world. That night, admiring fans from across the state gathered in Morgantown to welcome back their own hometown heroes.
When we landed in Pittsburgh, we got about halfway to Morgantown and the State Highway Patrol met us, and it was pure bedlam.
I just remember driving into Morgantown. We were all on a bus. We were kind of excited, and as the bus lights scanned across the parking lot in front of the stadium, all you saw was the whole parking lot move, and you had to really take another look at it, and here it was just filled with people. And I remember having chills coming up and down my back because of the fact that there was thousands of people out there rooting us on and waiting for us to come home, and it was a nice feeling.
West Virginia took up residency in the nation's top 20 and refused to move out. The 1982 season was capped off with a Gator Bowl bid, and in 1983, there was a 9-3 record and a Hall of Fame Bowl championship. But there was still one hurdle to overcome, one more test for Neyland and his Mountaineers: Penn State.
Penn State has been a thorn in our side for a long time, and our kids felt we were good, and we felt this was our year to get a little bit of respect back, so to speak.
For 29 years, the Penn State game had been West Virginia's worst nightmare, but all that was about to change. The Mountaineer defense took control early on as the game turned into a brutal battle, with both sides struggling to gain the edge. Fullback Ron Wolfley put West Virginia on top 7-0. But when D.J. Dozier burst through the line and rumbled into the end zone, ghosts of seasons past began to haunt the Mountaineers. Finally, in the fourth quarter, place kicker Paul Woodside put West Virginia back on top with a 49-yard field goal. Penn State came charging back, only to have the Mountaineer defense take the ball away and allow halfback Pat Randolph to write a brand new chapter of Mountaineer history.
And the handoff given to Randolph with blocker, swings out to the right, cuts down over the 20, the 15, the 10, the 5. Touchdown, West Virginia! Go, Pat! Scott Barrows with a...
This was it. The 17-14 victory over Penn State was the biggest win in Mountaineer Field history. The Mountaineers had arrived. West Virginia football was second to none.
This team is going to work at being crazy today. On the field.
Great teams are made up of great players. And in Don Neyland's early years, he had some of the best players in America wearing the gold and blue.
Everybody understand that?
Linebacker Darrell Talley, number 90, put fear in the hearts of opponents with his all-out passion for punishment.
I just wanted to run. I just wanted to run and tackle and prove to the guy across in front of me that he could not beat me. I would not let the guy in front of me beat me. I refuse to be beaten. If I'm beaten one play, I'm coming back the next play twice as hard, because I don't think there's anybody that can beat me consistently. And that's what I think is the mark of a good football player, refusing to quit.
In 1982, Darrell Talley became the first consensus All-American from West Virginia since Bruce Bosley. However, just 3 years later, the Mountaineers had another consensus choice for All-American, number 77, offensive lineman Brian Joswiak. During his junior season, Joswiak checked in at 6'5", 290 pounds, and could bench press 480. He was clearly the best collegiate offensive lineman in America.
I think my strength was my strength. I was by no means a finesse player. I didn't have the moves. I had a couple techniques, but because I was so strong, I overpowered a lot of guys. I hate using the word cocky, but that's what happens. When you step on the field, you change, you know, and you become an individual that knows nobody can beat you. And that's a great asset to have.
A great asset for any team is its kicking game. And for 4 years, the Mountaineers were blessed with one of the finest kickers in the nation, All-American Paul Woodside.
Paul Woodside, the first time I met him, handed me a card and it said, "I am a stutterer. Please bear with me." And he could hardly talk to me. And I remember going out in the field. He was a walk-on for us. And he kicked that ball right straight down through the middle from 40, 45 yards out. And I told Donnie Young, we've had a great recruiting year on a guy I've never even seen or heard of before. 4 years later, this guy had become one of the greatest kickers in NCAA history. And he was just a scream. Our team loved Paul Woodside, probably one of the most contagious football players we've ever had on this team. He was a very, very special guy.
For the Mountaineers, the 1985 and 86 seasons were filled with frustration. While a punishing defense had become a West Virginia trademark, the offense at times seemed to be missing a spark.
We needed a quarterback, and a young freshman came in by the name of Major Harris. And all of a sudden we looked around and we saw this guy had some magic about him. I also had him in camp in between his junior and senior year. And at 7 o'clock at night, we would always play touch tap, and nobody could touch him. And I said, if they can't touch him, I know they're going to have trouble tackling him.
From the beginning, he was different. You knew there was something about him that set him apart from normal athletes. Sometimes you weren't sure what it was, but you knew there was something special about him. This guy could be a running back. He could be a wide receiver. He could be a quarterback.
He'd make so many amazing plays, or things that you didn't think a human being could do, twist, turn, and I've never seen someone that could do the things he could do on a football field. You know, I don't think I ever will. And we watched it on films, and our coaches would just say, watch this. You know, they were amazed.
The amazing freshman put the magic back in the Mountaineers' offense. Over the final 7 games of the '87 season, West Virginia averaged more than 35 points per game. Players, fans, and coaches all could feel the momentum building.
Every player on my team in 1987 felt they should have been 11-0. They never felt one team was really better than us, and they were all back.
Everybody on the team, I thought it fitted perfect together because, you know, we had an experienced offensive line, experienced receivers, we had a great defense. I just thought, you know, we was a team.
Our goal, we created a triangle, a pyramid for our goals, and at the top was win. Bottom line was win. We just want to win whatever it takes.
Mountaineers charged into the '88 season like a team on a mission. They would not simply beat other teams, they would crush them. Defensively, they destroyed their opposition with co-captains Robert Pickett and Bo Orlando leading the attack. On the other side of the ball, 5 fifth-year seniors on the offensive line completely dominated the line of scrimmage. They opened huge holes for Major and company to gallop through on their way to scoring a stunning 43 points per game.
And every time we walked on the field that year, you know, we knew that if we did what we had to do, no one was going to beat us. I mean, that was our goal every game, not just to beat people, it was to crush them.
West Virginia's big challenge in '88 is supposed to have come from Penn State. Joe Paterno and his Nittany Lions rolled into Morgantown for a scheduled showdown to help determine the Beast of the East. Instead, it turned out to be an all-out massacre.
I kind of felt early in the game that things were going our way because we had sent in a play 29 stick, which is an option to the left. Well, Major called 29 stick in the huddle, and the entire team ran 29 stick, but he ran 28 stick, which means the entire team's gone left and Major's gone right.
The clock was ticking down on the 22nd clock, and I tried to get the, I had to tell them to play real quick and get out to the line. And I ran up to the line, and I knew it was an option, but I forgot which way it was. So I just started running, and I just kept running.
Here's Harris in trouble. Stiff arms, a would-be tackler. Comes down over the 25 to 20. Goes around about at the 15 to 10 to 5. A touchdown, West Virginia. He did it. What a move he made on the first tackler. What a move he made on the second, on the third. And he gallops in for the touchdown.
The most gorgeous run I'd ever seen. And I'll never forget it because when he came off the field, he said, my fault, Coach. I went the wrong way. I said, oh, don't worry about it, Major. We'll accept those kind of results.
The magnificent run by Major Harris set the stage for an overwhelming triumph over Penn State. Halftime, the score was an unbelievable 41-8. On both offense and defense, West Virginia had ruled the entire game. Mountaineer fans could not have been happier. Heisman talk surrounded Major Harris. West Virginia was ranked 4th in the nation, undefeated, and headed into history. Finally, on a rainy evening in Morgantown, only one team, the Syracuse Orangemen, stood in the way of the Mountaineers and their dream of a perfect season.
We could have beat anyone. We went out there to become the elite. When you go undefeated in major college football, you're no longer a 10-1 team, you're an elite team. And that's what we wanted to be, and there was no one taking that away from us.
West Virginia demolished the Orangemen in an awesome display of power football. For the 11th time this season, they had completely controlled every aspect of the game. But their victory on this day was more than just another win. This was a triumph of perfection. It was a victory not only for the university, but for the entire state. And after the game, Mountaineer faithful showered their team with a spontaneous ovation that will be remembered for a lifetime.
That's probably the strongest memory I have of that last year was when we went out on the field. It was amazing. I still get chills when I think about it because, we went back out on that field and no one had left. There was 66,000 people there, probably 20 minutes after the game, and no one left. And we went out there, and I remember Coach Nealon, we put him up on our shoulders and took him around the field, and we just took off, running around the field and took a victory lap. And God, what a feeling that was. It still gives me chills when I think about it. And it's hard to put into words how that felt. But just to know that many people, would feel that way about you is something special.
They called it the game of the century. The undefeated Mountaineers versus the unbeaten Fighting Irish of Notre Dame. Incredibly, Don Nehlen had brought a school from one of the smallest states in the Union to the very brink of a national championship. However, the dreams of a national title that night ended for West Virginia when Major Harris was injured on the game's third play. Notre Dame rose up to defeat the Mountaineers 34-21. For Don Nehlen and his squad, the loss was a disappointing finish to a magnificent year. A season which saw West Virginia climb to the very pinnacle of collegiate football. It brought to new heights a gridiron tradition of pride and excellence. Under Nehlen, there has been a virtual parade of WVU players marching into professional football, from quarterbacks to defensive backs, from linebackers to linemen. The Mountaineers have left their mark in the NFL. The decade of the 80s was a period of unprecedented success for Mountaineer football. 7 bowl games, 27 players chosen in the NFL draft, and an opportunity to play for the national championship. For the man who led them through this glorious golden era, head coach Don Nehlen, the start of the Mountaineers' second century is marked by the birth of the Big East Football Conference. And it will be Coach Nehlen who will proudly guide this program into a brand new era of Mountaineer glory. The Mountaineer spirit has stood brave and courageous for a century, guarding a tradition of gridiron glory. For all of West Virginia, Bring On the Mountaineers has become a celebrated call to honor, echoing throughout 100 years of West Virginia football.